Hello, DPS community. Welcome to the EDUCA DPS Podcast, where we inform families and connect communities. My name is Javier Ibarra, your host of the EDUCA Podcast in English. Today in the studio, we have Courtney Kallas, special education teacher for Denver Public Schools. She works in the Self-Determination Center based out of the Contemporary Learning Academy, also known as CLA, one of our pathway high schools here at DPS. In the spirit of students first, equity, diversity, and inclusion, Courtney will be sharing with us all about the 18 to 21 transition service program that helps our 18 to 21-year-olds. And I know what you're thinking, 18 to 21, I thought DPS only focuses on 3 to 18. Not today. We're going to find out more about this. She works with that age group with special needs, skills that will help them through their lives. Courtney, I want to thank you for joining us here today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Courtney, just to give our audience a bit of a background, can you tell us how long have you worked for Denver Public Schools, and what is the most fulfilling part of your journey with Team DPS?
So I've worked for DPS for 18 years.
Wow.
I started as a paraprofessional at Bryant Webster. I was a literacy para and then helped them in their office after school. And I think that the reason I've stayed with DPS is because of the people, the collaborations that I've had, the students, the families. I think that I've grown the most because of the people.
I'm glad that you're sharing that because, like you, right, you've been in DPS for a long time. I am a DPS alum, and so I grew up in the southwest side of the city, and I think it's really great when we have folks that have been here through a lot of transitions, right? 18 years, that includes a lot of things outside of education, but also all the breakthroughs in education. Something that, and I'm going to tease the topic here a little bit, that we were talking about right before we started the show. You said something about how special education has only been really around since 1994?
That's when the IDEA was authorized, yeah.
What happened before that?
There were other laws. They were sort of they were thinner. The policy, the protections were a lot thinner, and through a lot of actually like protesting, demonstration, a lot of just like work around the civil rights for people with disabilities, special education law was created, and even since then, we're going to talk about transition today. And transition, yes, was in the 1994 authorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, but it wasn't until 2004 that it actually had the idea was fleshed out and it had some teeth. And so we're talking about something that's really relatively new.
And I'm glad you said that because when we do the EDUCAs, I've been around DPS for a while now, DPS alum, and been in the education field for a few years. Normally I have a really good sense of the topic, right? Normally I'm not a novice, but that's not the case here today. And so if I say something that's out of character, if you will, stop me, say something, right? Because I think that like many of the folks who are listening or watching, don't know. And the reason why I think is because if you think about it, 1994, really, if that's the measure where we're starting off with this journey.
It really started in the 50s.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, like I said, there was legislation, but it was pretty thin, and so we're really. I mean, the history is parallel with the civil rights history, and I think that that's something that a lot of people don't know either. That disability rights are civil rights, and
thank you for that.
And the fight was parallel and also linked.
We need to get that on a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Disability rights are civil rights.
Yeah.
That's
I think someone's made it. I definitely know it's out there.
I haven't coined that. I'm not original. All right, Courtney. Well, let's get into the topic today. My first question for you is, what are the 18 to 21 transition services for students in special education?
Well, 18 to 21 transition services are in the areas of employment, education and training, and independent living. They are the tail end of transition services, which actually start at age 15 for students that have individual education programs in special education.
Why do we here at DPS focus on 18 to 21? Why don't we just stop at 18?
Well, it's in the law. So in IDEA, the minimum, the students are eligible and entitled to services until they're 21, transition services. And some states have it longer. In Michigan, you can get services till you're 25, but the minimum is up until age 21. And I think that that's because then you have to be done with high school, basically, or you can't be in public school anymore.
Right, and that's the law.
And that's the law.
Which leads me to my next question. Why are 18 to 21 transition services so important for our students in special education?
Well, it's they're really important because they're a time when they can be focused on their goals individually, without also the goals of graduating high school, also sort of these things that they have, all of these things that they're required to do to get a diploma.
Yeah.
And transition services should be happening throughout high school, but it's a unique opportunity for a student, if they have special education services, to really be able to focus on themselves and also have services really based in the community. Because 18 to 21 services are community-based. We're not transitioning into public school again, or even necessarily just education. Students are transitioning into their communities, into adulthood. That includes employment. That includes all the adulting things that you could think of, like housing, finances, feeding yourself, whole health, like total health, like mental and physical health. These are all things that they really get to focus on during this time.
I think it's important for our audience to know. I love sharing a perspective, especially since when I was a student in DPS, every day it gets further away from when I was, right? But when I was a student in DPS, the schools didn't look like what the schools look like now, right? I was in Manual High School, and there's washing machines inside of the classroom there to help the students prepare for those types of activities when they leave our care. And so I think it's really important for the community to know that DPS has been investing in these, what are they called? Life skills rooms?
I mean, they would be like independent living skills is what you would call them.
Right.
Yeah, I think that they're framed as life skills too.
Yeah.
I frame it for students as adulting. It's
adulting? So adulting rooms, right? DPS has been investing in this to transform certain classrooms that would have the capability in order to have something like that. You said cooking, right? I assume you have access to a stove or...
Well, so we, the model for the Self-Determination Center is we definitely take advantage of everything that this building here that CLA has to offer. It's a community school model at this point with the village being here, and so we're in partnership with them. But also too, there is a kitchen that they, food services used to use, but now they use it for community use. And so we do 12 weeks of, it's not only cooking instruction, but students, they learn about nutrition, they learn about meal planning, they budget, and they go shopping and cook for 12 weeks out of the year for one of our afternoon workshops, and we use that kitchen downstairs. So we don't have a classroom that has a kitchen in it, but we do have access to a kitchen.
I almost feel like that's a life skill that we should teach everybody.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm like doing this stuff and I'm just like, man, I wish I would have had this. And it's actually one of the workshops that they most enjoy. It's the second workshop of the year. After the first 4 weeks, we do a lot of introductory stuff, and they light up. I start to see who they are, and it's really cool.
Every day I'm more and more impressed with DPS, and I don't just say that because obviously I work for DPS and because I am a DPS alum, but when I hear of all the services that we have for our students and how we do more than academics.
Yes.
Right? Our core is academics for sure, right? But we're really preparing our students for life after they leave our care, right? After they leave our classrooms. And I just get so impressed, and I want to shout it to the world. But today we're focusing on you, and this is what we're going to shout out at the world so that they understand and see this, right? Which leads me to my next question. How long has the CLA Self-Determination Center been operating as an 18 to 21 transition services program here at DPS?
So this specific program has just been operating for just shy of 2 years. It was a collaboration between family and community engagement, the secondary transition services team in special education, and CLA to really address a gap that was seen, that was identified by teachers in pathway schools and just teachers in some secondary schools themselves, where students who have like more, they're called high incidence disabilities, they're more common, like dyslexia, ADHD, depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, high functioning autism. These are disabilities that oftentimes were not, people didn't think of 18 to 21 services as being for them. It's, often other programs in Denver Public Schools, there's other 18 to 21 programs, like I'm a part of a continuum of programming. And so there's programming now, since these 2 years for everyone. And so students with high incidence disabilities that maybe would benefit from more part-time services, that's what the Self-Determination Center is built for. And it's also built for students from our pathway schools that are in special education and then also may have like other layers of things going on. And so that's why there's a community school model, because it's not just special education programming that's going to be supportive. There's layers of programming to meet needs from different sources so that the net is strong, like the connections are strong, so that when they transition out of Denver Public Schools, right, that they have a community of support that they've built from this model. But the reason why is because if you have a high incidence disability, there aren't as many specific adult disability programs for you. You really have to figure out what services in your community, just blanket services, meet your needs. What nonprofits are a good fit for you? What agencies are a good fit for you? Right. It's not as it's never easy to get adult services, no matter what disability you have. Right. But there is more of a clear route if you have an intellectual disability or a developmental disability that meets a threshold. And these are the students that sort of, in the Self-Determination Center, they might, what you say, like they might fall through the cracks a little bit because they don't meet that threshold, or they don't have a disability that has like identified adult services.
And it sounds like trying to find the services is very daunting.
And it is, and that's a big part of what we do. That's one of the things that makes our program different from the programs at North High School and Northeast Early College, is that we do a lot of one-on-one services to navigate that, because it takes a lot of teaching a young person how do you engage with bureaucracy to get services. How do you follow up? How do you communicate? How do you advocate for yourself? Right. How do you talk about your disability when you maybe have shied away from even saying you had a disability your whole life because your disability was pretty invisible, right? And also, if you said you had a disability, possibly like you weren't sure how people were going to react. Yeah. And so there's a lot of that's a part of the self-determination skills.
Is there a stigma around that?
I mean, do you right? Like you can think about I think disability in general, we can just say has a stigma. Saying the word, talking about it. Right. But that is really changing, and that has to do a lot with the youth in the last 10 years. I mean, if you're on TikTok at all, like the disability community there is strong, and disability pride is really palpable, which is cool.
I think that when I was growing up, I think that the stigma was that you didn't want to announce that. You didn't want to say, oh yeah, I'm going to a different classroom or a different teacher for an hour or two because I need a little bit more time to do my test or a little bit more time to learn than others. I think that for a very long time, it seems like, and I'd love to go back to school and study this, right? And do a dissertation and be a doctor, right? Yeah. But I'd love to get into the eras of where public education has changed. And I feel that it has changed the most within the last 10 years. and not just in this realm, but in every realm,
Yeah.
right? And so many changes. It's hard to understand where to get the resources, and that's why I think a show like this has brought some value to our communities, because it highlights that, right? It shows you, like, we have a service, self-determination, right? And we
Yes.
offer it for 18 to 21-year-olds. Sign up, come over, understand it, get some information, right? And then also we're knocking down those barriers and the stigma. Like, no, it's almost seen as a superpower, if you will. We interviewed a young lady not too long ago, and she was a Betchert Scholar. She was a presidential scholar. She was the president of DECA. She was involved in all of these sports very academically, but she is dyslexic.
Yeah.
And she said that dyslexia was not her weakness, it was her superpower. And so we interviewed another young lady who said the only difference is she needs a little more time.
Yeah.
Right? Just a little more time, but it didn't make her anything different as far as a learner, right? Everyone is still learning. And I think about it,
Yes.
even for me, like, there are things that I understand that I prefer to learn maybe a visual or in repetition. And that's just what we're doing for our students here. And so I love that we're talking about stigmas, so that folks who might suspect that they have a learning disability, if I will, can come out and say, hey, I'm trying to get some resources.
Yeah, I mean, and they can talk to the people in their buildings if they want to get an evaluation.
And you can do that in any DPS school.
You in any DPS school. I mean, you could go to Child Find and you could do it. And I think, there's a process, right? You're going to have a body of evidence. People will tell you. It's a whole process, but you have a right to learn that about yourself if you've never been identified. And I think something that I love to hear when you were talking about those two students is that they talk about their disabilities in the way that they identify with them, and they having that self-knowledge, having that opportunity to just flush that out for yourself as a young person is a game changer. And I think that that's a big part of what the Self-Determination Center aims to do with the students that participate in the programming.
That's why I'm so impressed with DPS, because we take the tagline, every learner thrives, that seriously.
Yeah.
That seriously. And whatever your definition of thriving is, right? If your definition is, today I learned how to cook, balance my budget, and do my laundry. And for you, that
We
is
all need that to thrive.
Right.
If I don't do any of those things, I'm not thriving.
Right? But for our students, they've been learning that for 12 weeks. Right? And now they have it.
And it's cyclical too. Like, if they're in the program for 3 years, they get
refreshers.
3 doses. Yeah. And every time they encounter that domain, right, that they build on it, and they come to it a new person because they've had a whole year and it's really cool to see. It's circling back, right, and spiraling up, and that's how the program is built.
What a visual for us. Courtney, I want to get into, or back into, what we were discussing earlier. You had mentioned that North High School, school here at DPS, and Northeast Early College also have self-determination centers.
They have 18 to 21 programs. So the Self-Determination Center is a model that's on a continuum of services. And so at Northeast Early College and at North High School, they have what's called a TIP program, and then they also have what's called a Community Plus program. And those are programs that have a different model of programming to meet like the continuum of needs that we have for students that are eligible for 18 to 21 or entitled to 18 to 21 transition services. And so really, when you want to get connected, right, if you're interested in this as a student or you're interested in this for your child, you talk to your case manager, and there'll be a process. There's always a process. It's just the thing. There's always paperwork, but based on sort of your goals, your needs, the services that you have in your IEP, you will have options as to what fits the best. And the programs at North and Northeast Early College are awesome too. They meet needs they talk, they support self-determination.
Yes.
They meet needs in all the same domains.
Yes.
It's just like, is it the best match for you?
Yeah.
And really the big difference with the Self-Determination Center is that it's for those students with high incidence disabilities where it used to just not be quite the right fit. And the services were a little too full-time for them. The students I'm working with, it's part-time programming and very individualized because they want to work. They may be trying to figure out how to get funding to go to college.
Important things here.
Yeah, they may have other responsibilities, and so it just looks a little bit different.
From a district perspective, when I think about a program here at CLA, a program at North, and then a program at Northeast Early College.
Oh, and I shouldn't forget, we also have a program called Project Search that's out of Northeast Early College, and that's a fifth-year program model. That's really cool too. That's another part of the continuum.
Service.
Yeah, it's great.
When I look at those, it's kind of strategic how they're spread out through the city, right? Because it kind of covers where our schools are. If I think about the majority of our schools, it kind of follows that path, right? Where it's CLA, North for that area of the city. They're almost regional, if you will.
And I think I don't work on the team that sort of coordinates that stuff, but I know that was something that was a part of the aim, is to figure out like where could we have regional
Put these
hubs.
programs.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Courtney, my next question for you, can you describe the core values of the program and how have they helped shaped this program and how it's developed?
Well, the values of the program are rooted in care.
Okay.
And affirmation for the students, for who they are. We always, the people that on my team, I have two transition coaches that I work with that are awesome. And what we always focus on is that, like, it's not the program, it's the individual, and we have to care enough to be responsive and affirm that we see what they need. And so that's the root of it. Also, there's 11 components of self-determination that we try to really touch on with all of the different pieces of programming. So that could be choice making, decision making, goal setting and goal acquisition, self-evaluation, problem solving, and it's rooted in research. Those values, those skills of self-determination. Also, one value that I particularly as a professional really root myself in is the dignity of risk.
What is that?
So, in a lot of times, especially if you are a student with a disability, when you were younger, before they figure before people figured out this person, has needs some accommodations, needs some more supports, needs different type of instruction, there was a lot of failure. And I think that, well-meaningly, the adults in that youth's life, don't want that youth to feel that again.
Sure. And
so once, there's an understanding of the disability, there's a lot of, they call it bubble wrapping to protect against more failure, right? Or we don't want them to get too hurt, right? Or we don't want them to feel that, because what would happen, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of research, and then there's just also a lot of discussion in the disability community that it's if I don't ever have the dignity of risking to fail, how am I going to learn?
Right.
And also too, are you treating me as human?
Wow.
Why do I have to be more protected than anybody else? And it's a deeper discussion, and I'm sure individuals have, people can decide what risk is good for them. But I do believe in that, and to design a program where we are supporting youth to take risks, positive risks, that push them out of their comfort zone a bit, so that they can grow. And if they do fail, what do you learn from failure, right?
Right.
What do you learn from a mistake? And so that's a big piece.
How beneficial. All I keep thinking about is, as you're talking about what you're teaching our students and what's going through the program, is how beneficial that's just to anyone in general, when I think about that, right?
Yeah.
Especially I have a business background, and we call it failing forward.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, a lot of the research is from business stuff. Yeah.
Well, then.
So talk about it. Sorry.
Yeah,
But I'm like, yeah.
Then I knew more than I thought coming into it. But it talks about how you should fail first and fail often.
Yep.
Because only through that are you learning and really taking a chance on whatever it is. And in the business route, it's talking about taking a chance on yourself, taking a chance on the ideas and guiding it, right? There are people who say through the research in business, you make the best educated guess through your experience. But if you're never allowed to fail, if you're never allowed to even try, and you're wrapped in bubble wrap, how successful do we really expect you to be?
Well, and also too, having a disability, how do you understand what accommodations that you need? How do you understand how possibly your disability impacts you in that situation so that you can speak up, or so that you can like situate yourself to like next time, you know, learn something new or have a little bit more success. You know, that's how you learn. Just like, that's just, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But like connecting it back to that.
Well, and then through this program, how do you know if it's successful? How do you know if your students are succeeding with what you're doing? Because it doesn't sound like there are too many tests or...
No, transition is a results-oriented process, and so there are the domains. So like what we do with students is guided by their individual education program.
Okay.
They work with us to develop the transition plan within that individual education program, and so they have a very concrete goal in education and training after high school, in career and employment, and then also in independent living. And so we're not just throwing stuff at the wall, right? Like we're targeted in our individual work with them. But then there's like global needs, right? That everybody would benefit from learning about.
That you sprinkle in.
Yeah, like disability knowledge, the healthy homes with the cooking workshop. We have a Money Matters workshop. We have a workshop around our relationship with ourselves. And like, what is that? How does that support us? We have lots of work readiness stuff. But yeah, like we know that it works because if they're closer towards their goals. And that can be pretty cut and dry. Like you want to be a veterinary technology assistant. Well, by the time that you're done with us, have you been able to connect with Department of Vocational Rehabilitation? Did they find you eligible? Were you able to go through this process called justification for training? Did they feel like that made sense for you? And are you in a class right now?
Right. And that's how we measure success.
And that's how we measure success, is the results of it.
You used the term earlier, what was it? Things that affect the world?
Global?
Global?
Like there are global skills that people, like
Global
it's just
skills.
like everybody would benefit from these. Like they're within the transition domain, and us teaching them is going to meet individual needs, and then also just the needs, like most people have these needs, right?
Going along with that, how do you know if this particular programming is having an impact in the DPS community based on that global term that you use?
Well, I mean, it's really like, are they able to do the things that we've set out to teach them? Can they independently, are they building a budget, or interdependently with like their roommates or whatever in that situation?
Sure.
It's just, are they doing those things? But then also too, it's what they tell us. We do a lot, like I said, we meet with students one-on-one every week.
Sure.
They see somebody one-on-one every week, and we really ask them to notice and reflect, and they look at their goals and how they're doing, and they are like, yeah, I advocate way better now, or like, I'm writing way better now, or I know how to like get what I need from this place. And then families too, what they say, I take it, I take it pretty seriously when someone's like, man, my child is different now.
Right. Which is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's usually not like a bad thing.
Yeah.
If it is, then we talk about it, because you just have to meet
But you know
present.
how it's going through, or how it's going, because you're meeting weekly and everything is individualized and there are different parameters. So it really sounds like the impact here is great.
And the big thing is it's because it's small. I'm the only case manager. I do have 2 transition coaches.
Okay.
But it's not a mile wide, it's a mile deep. And to be able to make that kind of movement, to move the needle that way, you do have to have a small cohort so that you can have that individualization, so that you can address the needs that pop up when you're working with people on their goals for adulthood. A lot of things spring up when you're asking youth to become adults. It brings up a lot for people, and
emotions, I assume.
Yeah, and you
well.
can't. Yeah, you can't. It's like it's a process of change.
And too much change too quick makes people uncomfortable, I assume.
And they can backtrack, and they can freeze, and it's like a cycle of change. You watch a student inch toward that thing that they want, but they circle back a lot, and you can't get mad at them for that. They're human. That's what humans do.
Right. I feel like anyone does that.
Yeah, but you do need the space to be able to be there for them, and if you have 20 kids or 20 students, it's very hard to do that. And so we're a smaller program to address those kind of needs.
And space is important, which leads me to my next question is, why is it called the Self-Determination Center?
Well, I love alliteration.
Okay.
But it's the Self-Determination Center because self-determination is a core value in the disability community, and that comes out of civil rights. Youth, people with disabilities, if they don't have self-determination, that means somebody else is telling them what to do. And how do you feel when someone tells you what to do with your life?
Not good whatsoever.
And it's the same for anyone. And so, but it takes some skills to be self-determined, especially when you've grown up with people oftentimes making decisions for you, or not seeing that you could make a decision, or maybe you make a decision that's like, whoa, not very informed, but like people have a huge reaction to it.
Sure.
And kind of protect you from making a decision again because that decision went real bad. But it's like, no, we have,
What did we learn from it?
Yeah, what did we learn from it? How do we create space? And so that is why it's called the Self-Determination Center, because it's the core value. We should be able to be leaders in our own life and figure out what does that look like for us.
It sounds like a really great program with a lot of intricacies. How can students and families who are looking for this type of information or program explore the CLA Self-Determination Center to see if it's a good fit for them?
Well, they should talk to their child's special education teacher, or
at their school.
At their school, yep. Whoever they go to their individual education program meeting, their IEP meeting. That person is going to be that person. If that person doesn't know, you can. John Dumas is the district person that really supports the process of figuring out, like it's called the location determination process, or if the transition services for 18 to 21 are needed based on the individual education program. And you really want to start thinking about it in the first years of high school, and just seeing if it's a good option, just putting it on the table.
Right.
Because you do have to fill out paperwork.
There's a process, like anything.
There's a body of evidence.
Right. As more people see this show, more people are going to know.
Oh yeah.
And
it's awesome.
And it's going to increase the amount of folks that you have in this program.
Well, and two, if 18 to 21, if that doesn't seem like it fits, you still can, like, transition services are embedded in high school. You at age 15, you get a transition plan. And so if you know to advocate for that you really want to make sure that those services are robust in high school. There's a lot of ways to collaborate with career and tech ed, with extracurricular activities, with all the work-based learning activities that happen. Like, it doesn't just happen through special education programming. It happens with accessing programming that already exists in your high school and in the DPS ecosystem. Which
is great to have that. And like you said, and I'm glad you brought that up for our listeners and our audience here, because I don't want them to come away from this thinking, oh, I have to start to think about transition services at 18.
No.
Your student is already going through that. There's already...
Age 15.
Yeah, it's all part of your program.
Yeah, ninth grade.
But depending on where you are in your school and where you are in our district, you are also getting the benefit of having the resources that high school brings to your students in general.
Yeah,
right?
And then you might need accommodations to access it. You might need to figure out scheduling.
Yeah.
But all of those things can happen. And they can be written into the IEP so that you do have a plan.
Right. and if you plan it, you will succeed.
I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely. Going along with this program, we talked about how to get access. We talked about what it is. But what we haven't talked about is what are your goals for the program?
Well, I really want to change the data for students with disabilities. The data in general, like it turns into public health data when youth with disabilities become adults, and the outcomes are like the expectations of people with disabilities, especially with high incidence or low incidence disabilities, they're kind of low. They're at a baseline, and so people, the youth that I work with actually become a statistic of like underemployed people. They also are people that are more at risk of housing insecurity. There is risk of substance overuse or substance dependency to self-medicate. And like sadly enough too, like a lot of people who are incarcerated have disabilities, have low incidence disabilities, and a lot of times, like I think that definitely shouldn't be the case. A lot of times it's just because like there wasn't a plan, right? There wasn't the support to navigate that. There wasn't the knowledge of how to advocate for an accommodation at work. You know, I have dyslexia. Could I please get text to speech? Could you write out this checklist? I have ADHD. If you give me a checklist, I'm good. Right. You know?
Wow. See, what an amazing thing to highlight. Now, quick side question here is this also found in our homeless population? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I think we have this opportunity as a school district to affect public health outcomes by really providing robust transition services, not only in 18 to 21, but starting at age 15. Because if we can give people the tools to know themselves and be able to talk about or identify with their disability and know what's out there to support them, you know, there's a chance, right? There's no reason the data couldn't be different. What an amazing impact that you, professionals like yourself, are having not only on your students, but in society as well. Are we the only school district doing something similar like this?
No, it's federal law.
Federal law.
Yeah, transition services are a part of the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. All school districts have transition services, have a version of 18 to 21 transition services. They just look really different. There's no certain model that you're given to do it. But DPS has an amazing job of having a continuum of trying to serve everybody, because there are school districts that, for better or for worse, really focus on students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and that's who gets 18 to 21 services, and they should. But there is a whole continuum of students who are on both sides of that margin, right, that benefit from having these kinds of services.
I want to ask about the student experience. What is the experience of our 18 to 21-year-olds that are going through this Self-Determination Center program? What is it? What are they going through right now?
Well,
give us a highlight.
What I hear and what I hope to continue to hear is that they have an experience that honors them. One that's a very positive educational experience, that where they feel listened to, where they feel seen, where their interests, preferences, values, their priorities are worked into the plan. That they have opportunities to expand their experience so that they can expand their expectations even of themselves. That they, there's an experience of care. People feel like it's a safe space for them to be who they are. That I think that for our team means everything to hear that, because we do that very intentionally. School can bring up a lot for a person who has a disability, and to be an end cap that feels positive and honors them, like I hope we can continue to create that.
Courtney, I have a last question for you. Do you have a final message for us?
I think I want to go back to that dignity of risk. It's really important for us as adults that are in in DPS, right, in a system that cares for students, that has services for students, that we are reliable adults that allow students to know themselves, to take risks, that propel them forward positively, right, propel them in the direction of where they want to be. And it's no different for a student with a disability or a student who doesn't have an identified disability.
Thank you for sharing that. What is the best way for folks in the community to support our students or the work that you're doing?
I mean, I think talking about it, like taking the risk to ask about disability, to learn about disability. I mentioned before, like TikTok, there's a lot of people on there, for better or for worse, right? Like, but there's, there's a lot of resources to learn about disability. If parents and families need resources, there's actually several groups. There's the Thrive Center in Aurora that has wonderful programming. It's a parent information center. The Peak Parent Center is also a parent information center. It's out of Colorado Springs, but they do a ton of stuff up here and have great programming. And then Grupo Vida is a group for Hispanic families, and they operate out of Children's Hospital, and they're awesome and do a ton of work. Advocacy Denver as well. That's our local ARC, and they do a ton of programming and support families to really understand their rights and young adults to understand their rights. And so, I mean, there's a whole community, and just like getting curious about that, I think, is what people could do that I think would change things. Absolutely.
Courtney, I want to thank you for coming on the show today and sharing all of this knowledge with us. You use the metaphor mile wide or a mile deep. I feel like we went a mile wide, and I think that we can continue to have more shows or more episodes of where we can dive a little deeper and go a mile deep into certain things that you're working on. But thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really cool. It's great to talk about this stuff and to share it. So thank you for your interest.
Thank you. Well, folks, there you have it. This concludes our EDUCA DPS podcast for today. I want to thank our special guest, Courtney Kallas, for this very important information. I want to ask our audience if you can help us, please share this episode. It might not have resonated with you, or it might have, but it might resonate with someone else as well, right? So even Courtney's asking for it. Please help us share this content and all of our EDUCA content with your relatives, with your friends, with the DPS community. For this and more DPS multimedia productions and content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Denver Public Schools Plus. We are also on any main podcast platform. All you have to do is look for the Denver Public Schools Podcast, or you can even tell Alexa, say, Alexa, play the Denver Public Schools Podcast. I want to give a big thank you to the Communications Department and our proud Superintendent of Denver Public Schools, Dr. Alex Marrero, for the support of EDUCA and all of our multimedia productions. Please remember to tell your children more often. And Courtney, can I have you help me say this with me?
Are we doing it in tandem?
We're doing it in tandem.
Okay.
Ready?
I believe in you, and I know you can do it.
Until next time.